Hello and welcome back to Politically Incorrect. I'm Tom Christiano. Well, tonight we have an outstanding panel to celebrate our 349th Politically Incorrect show and the first show of our 19th fall season. So we survived 18 years somehow. I had Bernie Lynch on the show many times, but tonight he's going to help us out again for his 25th time on the show. So we're going to talk quite a bit about state and local and Lowell issues on the show tonight. With me tonight we have Tom Golden. How are you, Tom?
Tom, how you doing? Thank
Good,
you very
good.
much.
Your 19th time on the show, Tom.
I'm chasing Bernie here for 25,
Yeah,
19.
25, 19.
And then we have the kid over there.
With
the kid.
9.
Yeah,
nine
the
times.
kid. So I'm trying to, chase the silver fox here.
Yeah. Well, he's not quite
yet.
silver.
Oh, no, William.
Yeah, you guys are getting it, but you didn't catch my silver yet. Not all silver.
I'm missing silver. I'm going right to white.
But you're still so young, right, Tom? I remember you got elected as a state rep, what, at 23?
23, yeah.
That was amazing.
42,
and then every time you come on the show, I say, you got elected so young. When are you going to run for governor, right?
And I keep saying the same thing. Do you like me? I mean,
You don't want to be governor?
It's like being city manager.
Very similar.
It's a tough job, right? That's what you mean, right? Yeah.
Very tough.
So as everyone knows, you're a state representative for how many years now, Tom?
I'm on my 10th term.
10th term.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. So your next election will be next year, 2014?
Correct, 2014.
Great, great.
He's actually the dean of the delegation for
Yeah,
Lowell. He's the
absolutely.
longest serving.
Really?
of all the-
Wow, and
Not
you're
exactly
so
the
young.
oldest,
No,
but
no.
the longest
And
serving.
you're so
Actually,
young.
you're the youngest.
Correct. Yeah, I'm the youngest out of them, and even greater
You're a
Lowell
lot
area.
You're a lot younger than Kevin Murphy.
A lot younger, much younger. And Kevin brings that up every now and then. He brings up the fact that when he was running track at age 18, I was talking to him about I wasn't born yet.
Yeah, right.
But, see, we hope Kevin doesn't see this portion, and Bernie.
Oh, I do.
Bernie, I hope you bringing up the fact that it stays here between us.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being on the
Thank
show
you, Tom,
again,
very much.
Tom. And I'm looking forward to your 20th appearance.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Bernie Lynch, for being back on the show again. It's
Well,
really
great.
a pleasure to have you on the show. As you know, 25 times, it's fantastic. I'm dying to get you up in the mid-30s, so you'll have the most of anybody.
Oh, wow.
Which would be
See,
fantastic.
now I have something to shoot for.
Yeah,
Silver, gold.
In my career.
Yeah,
This
your
is
career,
something I
right.
can point to.
Now that'd be a
that platinum.
certificate, right?
No, I welcome the opportunity to come back and visit and speak with you. So
and
this
talk
is,
about
this is good.
the
And to
changes
be
that-
here with two great state representatives.
Yeah,
this
it's
is
a nice,
too
should be
kind.
a great show
good, yeah.
with you guys on it. I really appreciate you all coming here tonight.
Glad to do it.
And as everyone knows, Bernie Lynch is the city manager of the city of Lowell. And how many years has that been now,
Been
Bernie?
a little over 7 years now.
7 years.
Yep. So it's which in Lowell is an accomplishment. It's
record.
4.5 years is the average.
Really?
And so there's only 3, I think, ahead of me now. That yeah.
I had no idea. I knew it's a tough job, though, because I could read in the Lowell Sun how tough things are sometimes in
Well,
Lowell and probably every other town.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Every community has
Yeah.
its challenges.
Yes.
And, but no, Lowell is doing very well financially, doing very well in terms of economic development.
Yeah.
Operationally, we do well. We get a lot of help from these guys up on Beacon Hill.
Yeah.
And the city's moving in the right direction. So
I,
it's
I
great.
would say so. I go there a lot for the art shows. Recently on
Right.
Market Street there, and you have the Brush with History Gallery. A lot of artists are there. Oh, and the Western Avenue
Western
Studios.
Ave Studios. That's the-
fantastic now.
Yeah,
It's
that's the
fantastic.
largest. We think it's the largest accumulation of artist space in New England, actually.
Wow, it's
so
fantastic.
it's an amazing thing to see, and we have a lot of artist housing that's been put in.
Yeah, which is nice.
Which is great, and the key part of the strategy, the economic development strategy, is the creative economy, and so we're very pleased with what we're seeing, and that brings the restaurants and the coffee shops and the other little shops that come with it, and tourism is a big part of the city. So it all gels together. Having the university is a big part of it, certainly for us.
And that's
So
expanding too, in terms of dorms and things like that, and
constantly,
buildings.
yeah, constantly.
It's,
It's
Marty's
it is.
doing a great job there, right? Marty Meehan, I think.
Yeah, he's doing a very
I think
good
it's
seems-
because of the talent of the professors that he has, but that's
Well, thank
what
you.
I think.
Yeah,
appreciate
right,
that.
right. Oh, is one or both of you professors
I
there?
want to be. He is.
Yeah,
so
Oh,
I'm
really?
trying to-
Oh, that's
I
great,
do
Bernie.
I do
We're
one,
kidding.
one course a semester.
He teaches one
Yep.
course, yeah.
This semester, starting tomorrow, I'll be there at 8 in the morning, teaching a course on government fiscal policy.
Nice.
So,
nice. That's
so it's interesting.
fantastic.
Yeah, I've been doing it since 1980, thereabouts.
Really?
Yeah, for about 30 years.
That's
I took a little bit of
fantastic.
time off in the 90s, but yeah, it's fun.
And before you were the city manager of Lowell, of course, you were the town manager of Chelmsford
Correct.
for many years and town administrator before that.
Right.
So what do you think of the transition, Bernie? Are you glad you left Chelmsford for Lowell, or is that a
That
tough?
is a loaded
Wow.
question.
Wow.
Wow.
Well,
you know, usually Tom's nice and easy. I mean, wow, I can't wait for this one.
this is just
Wait for the answer.
I'm
this
excited
is
about
just
it.
an hour-long show.
Just an hour ago, yeah.
So,
Plenty of time to dance.
yeah. No, I mean, it was the right time. Lowell is a great opportunity. It was a challenge for me to move over to Lowell, and I loved my time at Chelmsford. I felt like a lot of things were accomplished during that period of time with the help of all the departments and obviously the town meeting, the selectmen. But I was looking for something different, and Lowell was a great opportunity. Lowell is really where I got my start, my interest in local government. Prior to that, I planned to be a state representative, or some type of state office, or state position, or maybe federal government. But when I saw what was happening in Lowell in the 1970s, it's really what's got me interested in what could happen in a city.
Yes.
And so it felt good.
That's when all the
when
big
that happened.
redevelopment
Right.
began. The national park, Paul Sangas
Exactly.
helped push that through.
All the
Just-
historic restoration work that
It's
began at that
fantastic
point in
over there.
time. Yep.
And it made a big improvement to a city like Lowell, because I know other cities that were in the same situation as Lowell in the 1960s that are still like
right.
Lowell in 1960s. I know them personally, I won't mention them, but it's very sad to go through
Mm-hmm.
these cities and you see the deterioration, the garbage all over the place. It just looks terrible.
Yeah,
But
no, Lowell has done very well, remarkably
has.
well over the last 40 years, and
It's fantastic.
really quite the turnaround. So it's great.
Well, thanks for being here, Bernie, and your
glad to do
busy
it.
schedule, and all of your busy schedules. Thanks, and so we'll have a lot to talk about. So I should move on to another state rep that's a good friend of mine, Jim Arciero. How are you, Jim?
Excellent. Thank you for having me on the show. What number is it now?
Ninth
My
time on this show. You've been on my other show, Political Junkies, a couple of times. But
Eventually,
ninth in this one.
I'll reach the status of the distinguished statesman here.
Yes,
and
yeah.
hopefully make 40 to 50 appearances on the show in years to come.
Well, I'm
I
going
think
out
They'll be
to
on your
show, he's
100th by
going
then.
gold.
That's right. Yeah.
But Jim, you haven't been a state rep as long as, say, Tom Golden, right? That's one reason. How many years has it been
This is
now?
my third term, so 5 years.
5
yeah,
years,
5 years
so
so far.
9 times in
I
5
can't-
years is
It goes
pretty
quick.
good.
It certainly does. I mean,
Yeah. And
I think Tom would, and Bernie, in public service, we're always moving from one issue to the next. And my goodness, you look at your watch, you look at the calendar, and all of a sudden it's 6 months. I mean, it just seems like time really flies when you're having fun,
Yes.
and working on just a myriad of projects that you work on, and your terms come up really quick. Every 2 years we have to run, and it's
Right, yeah.
constantly thinking about that in the back of our mind,
Yes,
as well as doing the job that we care for. So.
And you seem to do great when you do run for re-election, Jim, right? I mean, I know on the 4th of July parade you have like 50, 60 people following you in the parades. You
Now, just for the record, I always joke with my wife all the time. Our organizing for the 4th of July parade starts the day after Memorial Day, because certainly nobody just follows me at any parade. You know what I mean?
yes, oh yeah, I know. You make
but-
personal phone
but
calls.
But it's a lot of
Yeah.
work. It's a lot of fun though, and we
Yeah.
love participating in the 4th of July parade. It's one of the highlights of the year.
Well, I think you're doing a great job, Jim,
Thank you.
because you show up at so many things, as did Tom Golden, as our state reps.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, do we have the barbecue coming up at the senior center?
That's actually, we talked about that the other day.
Yeah, we're going to have
We
it
gotta
pretty soon,
work
right?
out
'Cause-
a-
Yeah, we're
Time.
working out the dates right now,
Oh,
but
good.
that's a tradition we started about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Representative Golden and I sat down and we wanted to do something giving back to the seniors,
Yeah.
and Representative Atkins and Nangle. We're a great team.
And we actually
it's-
cook too. That's
Oh,
scary.
yeah.
It's actually,
Yeah.
well, you've been there. You've
I
helped us
come
so
and
many
help
times.
serve.
And no one's got
every
sick
year,
so
right?
far, so
Yeah.
we have a great record.
Good. We have a great record.
Oh, it's
Super.
fantastic. Yeah, nobody's gotten sick. They all really love it, too. You get a
Yeah.
huge turnout.
It's a nice informal gathering that
Yeah.
we can just shoot the breeze about things other than just politics. But we're also there to troubleshoot problems, so it's great.
Oh,
It's a
yes,
nice-
you hear a
it's
lot
nice
from the
setting.
constituents, I believe,
Absolutely.
right, Tom? And
Right.
well,
Good time.
well, we have a lot of very interesting topics to talk about tonight. So maybe if we could start with one that I know Jim has been very involved in, which is the sex offender registry.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, do you want to update us on that? What's happening with that? Did we get the level 2s online yet?
Yeah, well, first, I've been a great partner with Lori Myers, who's, the executive director of Community Voices and a Chelmsford resident over the last 5 years on this issue. It all started, and I think I've talked about it in the show before, but about 5 years ago, my freshman year in the legislature, there was a 17-year-old girl in the neighborhood which I live in, the Forge Village neighborhood in Westford, that was sexually assaulted. And she was sexually assaulted by a level 2 sex offender who had spent time in Florida in jail and also lived in Westford. And the issue, really, the loophole, was the fact that he was on the registry in Florida, but was not on the online registry in Massachusetts. So, folks from the neighborhoods, of course, called my office, and we sat down and had community meetings discussing the matter. And we filed legislation with Community Voices, and we had bipartisan support for the bill. Representative Golden's one of the co-sponsors of the bill, and worked on the bill with me in the House. And it was kind of frustrating, being a legislative aide and being a legislative director in Senate Ways and Means and doing a lot of great things over the years before I ran. It really opened my eyes to how frustrating some good issues sometimes are, getting over the goal line and actually getting signed into law. But after 5 years and after a lot of ups and downs, we got it signed into law this year and signed by the governor.
Wonderful.
So currently, right now, July 13th, anyone who's a registered level 2 registered sex offender will be posted online, and the SJC now is going to rule if the 6,000 or so registered level 2 sex offenders would be online after their ruling, which is coming up in, I believe, a month.
Wonderful,
So, very
Jim.
soon,
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So that'd be great if they are online, right? For situations like in Forge Village. That
It
you
really is
mentioned.
about empowering citizens. It's
Yeah,
really
it's just,
about letting
know,
people be able to assess their own situation
Yeah,
and keep their neighborhood safe and protect their family. So
Yes, yeah,
the
that's
more
great.
transparency we have and the more information we have in this day,
Yeah.
the stronger communities we build. So
Wonderful, Jim. That's fantastic.
I just have to say the leadership that he took on 5 years ago and bringing everybody onto this
Yeah.
actually pushed it into the this year's Ways and Means budget.
Right.
And that particular piece, you see plenty of outside sections
Yes.
throughout the time and throughout budgets and whatnot, but that raised awareness immediately. And if it wasn't for Jim that made that happen, really pushed that, it probably, I would say it would have happened, but it takes time because you always have somebody. You always have, and I'm not downplaying what attorneys do; they're very important. And but someone's always saying, "Well, how about are we trampling on someone?
Yeah.
Are we
course.
doing something wrong?"
course.
When you're just trying to, like Jim had just said, trying to protect the community, empowering people to ensure that they know what is going on in their community. But
Sure.
hats off to Jim for the tenacious attitude he
Well,
had
thank you,
towards
Tom.
this.
Thank you.
Right
It was
all
a
the way to the
5-year
governor's
journey.
desk. It was a
Yeah.
journey.
It was a
that's
5-year
right.
journey, but
That's right.
I hats off to Lori Myers as well.
Well,
I mean,
Laurie
she
is
was
just, everyone knows her, and she's just awesome.
Yes,
when
she
it comes
works
to-
very hard.
just a
on
galvanizing
these
force in
issues.
this whole process, and
Yes,
and
yeah.
her history of her being an advocate in this field was immeasurably helpful for me. So
Yes, that's fantastic.
Problem.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jim. Maybe Bernie and Tom might have the most to contribute in the next issue. I don't know which is the methadone clinic issue. Recently, I think the zoning board in Lowell was deciding on the methadone clinic, which apparently the one in Lowell was asked to move out of its existing space within a particular time. So they found a space just over the Chelmsford border on Stedman Street. But it was in Lowell. But many people in Chelmsford and some in Lowell as well were objecting quite a bit about the methadone clinic, which might have maybe an average 500 patients a day going in to get a dose of methadone. Also, they were complaining about sidewalks weren't really adequate over there and that kind of thing. So the Zoning Board of Appeals, as I understand it, voted to deny that move over to this new location on Stedman Street. And then I think the latest I heard, that they're allowed to stay in their existing location for a little while longer, right? So Bernie and Tom, could you update us on that, what's happening, or what do you think should happen on the methadone clinic?
Well, it's sort of actually Tom and I have spoken about this issue. It's a real public health issue, not just for the city of Lowell, but for the entire region. Lowell is the largest community, so therefore you're going to have the largest number of users of the clinic coming from the city of Lowell. But there are people that utilize the services of the clinic from the greater Lowell region, and absent some type of action, if the clinic wasn't able to stay where they were or can't find someplace else, we'd have a real public health crisis on our hands. We have been working with the landlord, and he's been helpful in trying to accommodate some extension to work some things out. It's also, the case is actually being litigated right now, or it's in the process of being litigated against the city. The clinic owners have appealed the Board of Appeals decision, and so we're going through some back some negotiations, let's say, to see where this will end up, because we'd like to resolve this matter. And we'll have to see what comes of it all. I mean, the clinic has been operating in downtown Lowell in a very upscale office building for a number of years now. I forget the exact number. Do you happen to know that? It's like 15,
North of
16?
15?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
bad they can't
There's
stay
never
there.
there's never been a problem. It's just it's not the type of it's really not an office building type of use.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's operated fine. So now it needs to find another location, and so we'll see what comes of that. But as I said, it's never been an issue in downtown in the downtown area.
Yeah.
But I think something has to be resolved one way or another with it.
Yes, yeah.
So.
Tom, any thoughts on that?
No, I think Bernie hit the nail on the head. Something's going to happen. What is that something? Obviously there's litigation going on against the city right now. I think people are always concerned when something like this comes into play.
Yeah.
Neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very, very a huge concern for people because they don't understand or they don't know or they don't just like it. They just, period, they don't like it. But I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the day.
Yeah.
What the legal ramifications are, what DPH is going to come in and do.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the Department of Public Health is probably going to weigh in pretty strongly in one way or the other, where there's going to be the downtown area, Stedman Street, or if we come up with a third option.
Yeah, and we've spoken to them again, both Tom and I,
Yep.
and they're very concerned about it. And there'll be some alternative has to be developed. Given the issue of the opiate addictions that we're seeing, and again, these are not unique to Lowell. In fact, I've almost argued that they're a bigger issue out in the suburbs. We have other
very
issues down in Lowell with different substance abuse problems, but it's a massive problem in all of the neighboring communities. And we really have to work at that. And Tom's been a leader certainly on that issue at the State House and within the city of Lowell. But as this continues, we're going to have continued problems that people are going to need these types of treatments that these clinics provide.
Yeah.
So,
Has
and
somebody
there's a lot of
looked
and there's a lot of fear, as Tom said.
Yeah, there's
People
no
have
question about that.
questions. People don't understand exactly what it's all about, and all these fears sort of rise up, and that becomes the problem.
Yeah. Has somebody looked through the empty buildings in Lowell? Because there must be many empty buildings there, it seems to me. Not that many?
Not really.
really.
No,
Oh.
that's part of our economic development problem
wow,
is
you
that
guys
we have buildings that we have people that come in looking to locate businesses there, and they just aren't.
They can't.
There isn't space.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's
Cross
wonderful.
Point is almost, I know this is getting off a completely different subject, but Cross Point is almost 90% full. The Wanalancet, where this clinic had been located, is almost is in the 90s. And so it's, that's a problem we have. And it's a use that you have to have within certain, like everywhere else, there has to be zoning that applies. And it just doesn't, it's not necessarily a retail type operation.
No,
and
no.
So, and it isn't,
More-
you wouldn't put it in a residential zone.
No, more industrial.
It has to
maybe.
go into an industrial
Like
type of,
big,
right.
How about the new, the Hamilton Mills project, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a new big
That's a huge-
commercial, every
Well,
kind
it's
of
a-
zone, right, in the center of
Right, it's a
Lowell.
mixed use.
Mixed use, yeah.
It'll have several hundred residential units. It will have 300,000 or 400,000 square feet of commercial space. There's already there's another 55,000 that's ready for occupancy
online,
now,
right?
coming online.
55,000
Yeah.
ready for occupancy. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's
so-
going to be a nice big development when that's finished, right?
And then of course we have the trial court. That's
The
gonna
trial court
locate
that we're
there.
still working on.
Right.
And that's
Where's that going to be located?
That's in the Hamilton Canal,
Hamilton
Canal. Oh,
right
Hamilton-
at the
oh.
Lord Overpass. And so all told, the total investment there is somewhere between $750 million to $1 billion.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
A
it's
mixture of private and
mix of-
government.
Right,
kind of
mostly
funding.
private.
Mostly
The only
private, good.
the only real public is the courthouse. There's certainly been some assistance for infrastructure elements
Yes.
that legislators have been helpful
Yes.
to us, as well as the
Historical tax
administration.
credits.
Right.
Nice.
things of
That's
that
going to
nature.
be a
Low-income
huge
tax
boon
credits,
to
right.
the city of Lowell, I would think.
Oh, it is, and
It's going to beautify a lot of it, I think.
Well, that area that you're talking about, I mean, I can tell you a number of years ago when I worked over there, you wouldn't walk
Right.
down there.
Right.
And
Yeah,
it just,
yeah.
it was kind of like the area that time forgot.
Yeah,
And it was really, I don't want to say it was dangerous because I don't have the actual statistics, but it was just it was something that just wasn't pleasing to the eye.
It was a
Yes.
blighted area that,
Yeah.
that attracted, sort of a bad element. But we've got the city built a $21 million garage. My predecessor, then City Manager Cox, led the charge for that. It was approved, and it's very successful. The Lowell Community Health Center just put in a $40 million project that they serve about 50% of the population of the city. We have the Appleton Mills, which was a dilapidated, I compared it to Dresden. It was just a bombed out looking building that now has 130 units of artist housing. We have the Loft 27 Mills, that's another, I forget the exact number, 180, 200 units in there. Real upscale loft condominiums or apartments. We have another project going in there of another 50 some odd units. And then the courthouse, and then the rest of the project. It's really amazing what's happening down there.
When do you think that will be finished, Bernie?
It won't be done for another 7 or 8
7 or 8
years.
years, yeah, great,
It's
great.
been sort of planned out that way.
Well, that's
but,
fantastic.
yeah, it's a great project.
Well, the next topic has to do with development. Maybe we could just quickly talk about it because we have a lot to talk about, which is the 40B. Recently, a project has been floated in Chelmsford for 120 units, approximately, on Mill Road, which is off of Route 129, and then there's Mill Road, and it goes into Chelmsford, into Boston Road. So it's near the major highway, so there's maybe about 4 acres that the person would tear down a couple of dilapidated houses, and the developer's proposing 120 units, but only 20% of them as affordable. The rest would be market rate rental units, right? Which we don't really need, because I checked out what Princeton Properties charges for market rates, and it runs from approximately $1,500 to $2,000 a month. And the 1,500 is like 600 square feet. It's not a little thing for $1,500.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, if you calculate it, they can't really afford that, making even $15 an hour. They can't afford for 2 weeks of their pay to go to $1,500 a month. So it's not affordable to a lot of working people, working on an hourly basis. They can't really afford that. So it seemed to me, why don't we try to get that up from 20% to maybe 50% affordable? And then if you can't get 50, maybe you could settle for 40 or something. So I found out that there's a state law that you can't negotiate with the developer, the Zoning Board of Appeals can't, to increase the rate of affordable. That is, if they goes in with 20%, you can't negotiate with them. So my question to our state reps is, can you try to get that law changed so that the local Zoning Board of Appeals can at least try to negotiate an increase in affordable housing? Do you follow what I'm saying?
I'm following you, but the 40B has been something that obviously we've been discussing here in Chelmsford for
Long time.
12, 14 years.
Yeah, and you go back, I remember it was a big issue back in the late 80s when the Housing Opportunity Program was put in place that provided the HOPs for some home ownership. We had a number of projects that sort of came on the horizon at that point in time. But actually, Chelmsford's history on 40B actually goes back into the early 1970s, soon after it was enacted. And there was one of the test cases of it actually took place here in the town of Chelmsford, out on Mill Road, out where the soccer fields are.
Yes.
I believe that's where they were going to do that. So it's been kicking around for a long time.
I think the frustrating thing about a lot of it is the fact that, in 2010, they had a ballot initiative to abolish 40B and sort of start over with regulations. I know over the years, in the 5 years I've been in, Representative Golden has been, a leader in looking towards reform on 40B issues. Bernie, you've been on the front lines in Chelmsford. It's frustrating. When you look at Chelmsford. Chelmsford's one of the only town in my district. I represent Westford and Littleton as well that actually voted to repeal 40B. And I think the statistic was 58%. I think of the Massachusetts voters voted to keep it. So that's been frustrating. We've worked on a number of different reform initiatives in terms of. I think the biggest issue, especially for suburban communities, is local control.
Right.
Yes.
And that is being able to get your arms around it and plan accordingly.
Yes.
And that's been something we've worked on to get to that 10% threshold. I know there's been bills that I've filed with the current chair now, Senator Jamie Eldridge, to actually count trailer parks as part of your affordable to get to the 10%.
Oh yes, we've been trying
That's
to
we
been
have that
kicking for a while. Yeah.
And that's been an issue we've worked on as well. But I think
Yeah.
the frustrating thing is when it's on the ballot to start from scratch, which I thought was a good idea, and move forward. you know, you're kind of back to square one. So I do think there's plenty of reform to be done, and there's a hearing, I believe, in October, Representative.
That's right.
And I know
Relative
that
to,
relative to a
40B
whole host
bills.
of 40B bills.
Well, what do you think about my idea of trying to allow the local ZBAs to negotiate an increase in the affordable portion of the developments?
I think it'd be something that we could look at if BOS town meeting, you know, if they came forward and said, let's give this a shot. But knowing some of the members of the housing committee, as Jim had mentioned earlier, this, to them, this has had its hearing. It's, you know,
yeah.
40B, 58%, at least statewide, and even in this area,
statewide. I think
they've said, no, let's keep it the way it is. Do you tinker with it? And I think it gives more ammunition to the folks who want to keep it as is for us to be able to make any changes, whether it be with mobile homes or increasing it. But that's something I think we could absolutely take a look at.
certainly.
Well,
Yeah. It's an interesting. It is an interesting idea, and it does. The way I see it, there are two groups that are really advocates of 40B. There's the housing advocates like CHAPA, that are very concerned about the issue of affordability in housing. And then there's the housing developers.
Developers, of course.
And
Developers,
frankly, they would just as soon knock that 20% down to 10%
Oh, sure,
probably,
yes,
or,
yeah.
or less,
right.
as long as they could
yeah.
get the relief from zoning, so therefore build the large
yeah,
developments.
of course.
So, I mean, the idea of you'd at least get perhaps the affordable housing proponents on your side if you could increase it.
Yeah.
Now, you do run the risk that you could potentially kill a project by boosting it up to 40%, because when you look at the numbers, it might
has
not
to be-
work for a
yeah,
developer.
It still has to.
And that might become a way for communities to reject the project. So
That's what I'm saying.
there's a balance.
You have to
there.
look at the fact of why we're trying to increase it.
Yeah.
We're trying to increase it to kill it, because if it's affordable, you know, the revenue won't be coming in, therefore making the project not workable.
Yeah.
Or, you know, from your perspective, let's increase it and let's get to our 10% sooner rather than
because-
later, maybe. You know?
We could really use more affordable housing, I think, here in Chelmsford. Looking at what they're charging for rents on these new developments at Princeton properties, and these are, you could just look it up
That's
online
market,
and just check it out.
Yeah,
but it's
For
market rate.
650 square feet, it's unbelievable.
I know.
These
Yeah.
poor people, how are they going to live, you know, in their own place? A lot of them have to stay with their parents or their extended family because they can't afford their own apartment.
I'm trying to move back with mine.
Yeah.
I say that to my wife all the time. Should have moved out. You know, I mean,
They keep on changing the
keep
lock.
changing the locks. I don't know what's going
They have a
on.
lock for the
but,
basement?
moved into a flat. No basement anymore.
It was an easier time,
Yeah,
wasn't
it was an easier time. But no, I think it's an interesting thing to look at.
But maybe
and
if you could just think about it and maybe hopefully look at it if you can.
Oh, absolutely.
You
Certainly.
know, when it comes up, because
Absolutely.
what we really could use more affordable housing, more apartments at market rate. I don't think we need any more, especially in the zoning, which wasn't really originally zoned that way. And that's what 40Bs are for. They go in to override the local zoning laws, as you know. So,
But I put this out if anyone from BOS or town meeting that really wants to sit and say, hey, listen, we want to help this. I mean, because I think the whole piece is going to be that someone's trying to kill it.
Right.
If you're trying to kill the proposal, then the folks from the folks who are pro 40B are going to be like pushing it back, saying, you know, back in 2010, the voters have spoken. Leave this thing alone.
Yeah.
And when what you're trying to say is actually trying to help the proposal,
Yeah.
that's something. It gives it a lot of merit.
yeah, thanks. Thanks. And hopefully if the people on the Board of Selectmen and town meeting reps could contact our state representatives, if you agree with this, of trying to at least have the authority, the Zoning Board of Appeals, giving them the authority to negotiate an increase in the affordable component of 40B developments, then please write or email or call our state reps.
Sure.
Or state senator too, Mike Barrett. If we could talk a little bit about the gun laws and maybe mental health laws as well, maybe if we could start with Jim, because I know this has been an issue that you've been very concerned about, and I'm sure you all have too, because I've been reading what's going on in Lowell sometimes too. But so, Jim, what do you think about the gun laws? And,
Well, you know, clearly, you know, the tragedies in Newtown, you know, shed light on, you know, the interest by, you know, folks in the federal level as the state level to get our arms around our gun laws and to find how to, you know, protect our citizenry, and especially when it comes to background checks and it comes to mental health.
Yes.
You know, currently right now, the Joint Committee on Public Safety is traveling the state, conducting hearings regarding school safety legislation, as well as you know, background checks and issues pertaining to information sharing with mental illness. And we're anticipating, Representative
Naughton.
tell me if this is true. I believe sometime in the late fall we'll be coming to the floor or having a debate on the matter. It's interesting when you look at the statistics. Massachusetts is #1 in terms of gun control. We have one of the strongest gun control laws in the nation. There's a lot of things I really don't think we need to tinker with. Quite frankly, we've become a model for the rest of the country. The president has looked at Massachusetts as a model. But if you actually look at information sharing on mental illness with background checks, on the national background check that was put into law in 1999, we're at the bottom of the list. I think Massachusetts, in terms of criminal background checks, I think they've had something like 1.6 million checks investigated by the FBI since 1999, but nothing with information sharing on mental illness. I think there was only one, where I think we're the only state in the nation that had one, and that was because the FBI actually conducted its own audit to see if how this actually information sharing worked. So we're at the bottom of the list here, and a lot of it is because of a law we had in 1970. And in 1970, there was a mental health law that was passed, and essentially a lot of the issue is around privacy, with proof of residency, with mental illness, and also drug use. That has been somewhat, because of that law, has been under privacy issues. Because of that, Massachusetts hasn't had any real sharing since 1970 with any of this information. That has to change.
Yes.
And for myself, I've talked about this on other shows before. If this had changed in Virginia Tech in 2007, things could have been different. 32 people were killed. And because there was no exchanging of information of the mental health of the assassin, that possibly could have been prevented. And I've said this before too. My little cousin, was shot and killed. She was a grad student at the time, and she was an adjunct professor, and she was in one of the classrooms, and she was shot and killed. And so it's close to my heart too. The issue is. But essentially, I think we need to play it smart. And as legislators, we can't get caught up in the emotion of the matter. We have to stand back and look at the issue and look at the facts. And the facts are that Massachusetts is the strongest gun, has some of the strongest gun laws in the nation. But we're really bottom of the list when it comes to exchanging information on mental illness. So.
And you're going to work on that?
I anticipate in the fall, yeah.
Right, that's being worked on right now. Chairman Naughton, Hank Naughton from Clinton. He's the chairman of Homeland Security and Public Safety. He is actually doing the tour currently right now that Jim was talking about, where he's going throughout the state. And if he knows obviously what Jim is just saying, and we all know that Massachusetts, we are some of the toughest gun laws around. But then you have folks like NAMI, the North Association of Mental Illness, groups like that who are trying to make sure that the stigma is not placed, that everybody that has created, has been involved in these heinous crimes, that's not necessarily a mental illness. There's a lot going on here that
I think the definition of
mental illness of what exactly what they don't want. And I was speaking to somebody from NAMI just 2 weeks ago that sent out a letter to all of our offices talking about this. They don't want the stigma that if you have mental illness, then you're going to be violent.
Oh no, yeah, you shouldn't. No, yeah, nobody should think that way.
Right, but
however, if a person did gun down 30 people in a college because he goes insane for a while, I mean that is a form of mental illness. I believe. I don't think a rational, sane person would do that.
Correct.
So hopefully that organization doesn't feel that way.
Well, they just want to make sure that all individuals with mental illness aren't painted with the same brush.
No, we would never want to do that.
Because
and then it would discourage them from getting help, seeking counseling.
Right.
And that's what I'm sure this law stemmed from.
I mean, a lot of folks with mental illness aren't violent at all by any stretch.
Yeah, and then people would be disincentivized from getting help when they need it because they say, it's always going to come up on search records, and I might not be able to get a job later, get a promotion, et cetera.
Well, that's what a lot was going on with the information sharing, and that's where a lot of concern is. At least talking to the chairman about this, there's a lot of concern about how can we do this?
Yeah, to handle it the best, most sensitive way possible, so that people could go get help when they need it.
Right.
But you could try to figure out a way to catch those who might be maybe with just violence. If people express violence in their counseling sessions or something, I don't know, but
But the
It's a touchy issue, I agree.
right. The tragedy in Connecticut, there was law after law after law that was broken that
Yeah.
led up to
Yeah.
that,
Right.
and that's horrendous. Like, you
Right.
can't even think about it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
awful, awful, awful.
But could you imagine
How?
his parent, his mother?
That's right.
The child clearly had some mental issues. She knew that,
Correct.
and yet she has all these guns and rifles in the house, and takes him to the shooting range to
Yeah.
have fun and practice.
Tragedy, bad choices.
And then he's
tragedy,
playing with very
disgraceful,
violent video games
disgraceful.
in the cellar hour after hour. I mean, come on, the parents have to take responsibility as well,
Right.
right? And other individuals, every individual. I mean, so I agree. You can't just legislate.
But on this issue alone, I mean,
Morality.
you have to also look at the fact that other states did get their arms around it. I mean, Virginia, New York, Texas, hundreds of thousands of folks who they deemed had mental illness to receive a gun have been flagged, and that information has been shared. As well, as California, I think, is a much larger number, almost 1 million. So there are ways in other states we can compare them with, but it is a sensitive topic. And there is a lot of issues of the definition of mental illness in purchasing a gun. I think that definitely. I know the Gun Owners Action League has that concern as well as ACLU. I mean, so it's a broad spectrum of individuals.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Everybody's.
groups.
It's funny. You don't see goal in ACLU
Yeah.
almost on the same
Yeah.
The same
But
side
they're-
of this
yeah.
issue, saying,
Right.
hold on, we need to make sure we do this correctly.
Yes.
And that's going to be our job. I think. I really believe it'll be
Yeah.
sometime this fall.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean the thing that concern. I mean, I think clearly, these situations. I think the discussion here really speaks to the complexity of a lot of these issues, and privacy versus other rights and so on. But the incident in Newtown, the incident at Blacksburg, on and on and on, the movie theater out in Colorado, and they get the headlines. They grab the headlines in these cases. But if you add up the total number of victims, there's an epidemic of gun violence across the country that doesn't get the headlines. One person shot here, 2 people shot there. I mean, look at the city of Chicago. I mean,
it's unbelievable.
I don't know their current numbers, but it's
huge.
staggering.
Yes.
And it just speaks, from my mind, it speaks to the issue of guns in general.
Yeah.
They're and I don't want to put these guys on the spot, but they're too readily available.
Yeah.
And I mean, even people good, legitimate citizens that have guns, for whatever reason, very valid reasons, if their house gets broken into and they lose that gun, that gun ends up out on the street and causes problems.
Yeah.
We see this. Every community has problems like that to
Yeah.
some extent, but certainly the cities have them
Yes.
more than others. And I don't know how you get around that and
Yeah.
deal with that issue.
It's
So-
tough. It's tough, gee. Well, another issue right now, it's in the forefront of national news because many states are changing. I'm talking medical marijuana and also legalization of marijuana. First, there was a lot of states. There's over 20 states now, I think, that have legalized medical marijuana, including Massachusetts, I believe, right?
Right.
Recently. And now we have a number of them, like Colorado, I think Washington, Oregon, who have legalized it in its entirety, but still with some laws.
Well, you get what you have going on is the decriminalization of certain amounts of marijuana that the federal government still hasn't exactly gone on.
I thought Holder came out recently and said to
Well-
Colorado, oh, it's okay, you could go ahead and have this legalization. We're not going to come after. Didn't I read that recently?
Yeah, he came out and basically said they're not going to take any action.
Action.
but
Take any
they're
action,
not
right.
necessarily. They're certainly not
'Cause-
endorsing it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
because
in
I
the
read
past
something in
it was like,
California, they were very concerned with what was
oh yeah,
going
no,
on
and I
as
can
well.
understand it. But in the past, it was like you could have the state legalizing it, and the federal government saying, no, we still have our federal government
Correct.
laws. So,
Right.
what were people going to do? But anyway, so now in Massachusetts, what are we going to do here? What do you think about medical marijuana facilities? I guess a number of people have applied.
Right.
And I saw what they're going to charge for the application fee. The first one, not too bad, maybe $1,500 an application, but the second stage, like $30,000 an application, if I remember correctly, which I think is huge, just to apply for something.
What they're trying
For
to
a
do
license,
is keep,
right.
yeah,
For a
what they-
license.
but what they're trying to do is keep they're trying to bring the real players in, not necessarily have
Right.
Yeah, mom
Every-
and pop, or
yeah.
very small
They allow
players.
Pete, Jimmy, and
Yeah.
I
Joe.
think the law was it passed it passed the voters in this last election by over 60%.
60%,
And essentially you're going to be able to have 35 dispensaries throughout the Commonwealth.
35,
It's like
yeah.
5 per county.
Okay, yeah.
And you have to demonstrate that you can have appropriate investors to be, as Tom said, he's absolutely correct, be a player and to be someone who can actually be serious about being.
Legitimate's not the word, but that's the word I'm.
But it's true, though.
They
It
want
is
a
true, though.
legitimate business.
It is true.
That
It's
has,
true.
yeah.
It has proper security,
Right.
protocols, and so on.
Yes.
But I think one of the biggest issues that we had, I actually opposed it, when I was running, when the question was posed to me, and a lot of it was, and again, it was zoning and local control of communities. But recently, or not that recent, it's up a couple months now, the Attorney General had ruled that towns now have a say in the zoning, and they also have like sort of a refusal period if the particular area they had wasn't working appropriately. So there is more control from the communities now than there was before. However, the Attorney General also said that you can't circumvent the will of the people, and the people wanted this in the Commonwealth. I think a lot of it is based on that Wakefield case, in which Wakefield, their I think it's Board of Selectmen in their town meeting had just essentially said, no, we don't want it through an ordinance, and they can't do that. But they do have a say, and I think MMA was happy with the Attorney General's ruling on that they have a say with zoning.
Yeah, correct.
So.
And imagine in Lowell, someone might apply to have one in Lowell, don't you think, Bernie? Or
Yeah, I expect that they will. And we talked to the city council and the administration talked about doing a moratorium of sorts, and then came to the conclusion that a moratorium really would be counterproductive to what we want, which is to be able to, if we were to have a moratorium and it would be located elsewhere in the county, because everyone's going to get in and get their dispensary set up during these initial months. It then opens the door to a provision in the law that will allow for hardship cases for people to grow their own. So we looked at, I think it was Boulder, Colorado, that, or maybe it was Aurora. In Boulder. There were two communities we looked at. There were hundreds of these homegrown.
No surprise in Colorado, right?
Exactly.
No, but they turned basements.
That's
Right.
right.
The one.
And, they
yeah,
and
yeah.
so
That's-
the crime, actually, in the community that did the moratorium, or something like moratorium, actually had an increase in crime related to these homegrown marijuana
Because it was
facilities
homegrown, maybe in basements and all that, and
versus
whatever.
the community that said we're going to take a real educated approach to this.
Wow.
Regulated, yeah.
So that's it. The other issue for us is that from an economic development standpoint is the production facilities.
Yes.
We have been approached by people that want to put a production facility in the city, and it is the will of the people to have medical marijuana, and if it's going to be grown somewhere, there are good jobs that relate to it. There's and so on. So, but as far as the dispensaries go, we feel comfortable that the Attorney General's opinions, the regulations that have come out, would allow us with enough control.
Yeah.
But Lowell isn't the only place. There's going to be 5 of them in the county.
Yes.
There are neighboring communities
Yeah.
to Lowell
Sure.
that I know are being talked about for a dispensary as well. So it's not
Town I represent, Littleton, just had a public hearing on it a couple of weeks
And
ago.
what did they say? What was it?
Well, it was just more of an introduction of this group
Yeah.
that was interested,
Yeah.
and so it was more of a
Well,
discussion.
could I ask, in the production facility in the city of Lowell, what are they envisioning? An indoor facility with artificial lighting?
Yes.
Must be, right? Yeah, now an
Yeah,
outdoor
it won't be,
thing,
right,
Yeah.
We are focusing on urban agriculture, but that isn't what we had in mind.
Right. I imagine a lot
put
of
it in the
people
judicial
jump in
center,
that
can you?
fence.
Right next to the
Right
judicial
next
center?
right next to the judicial center. We do have a little farm right now. Right next to,
And we have
just-
community gardens.
You'd have to cover it,
Yeah, well, we have
Yeah, right.
we have community gardens in Lowell
Oh,
as
you
well.
do
so,
too? How's it working
They're
out?
doing
Great?
very well.
Wonderful.
Very well. Mill City Grows is a local organization
I think
that
that's
came
great.
up, and they've got this facility on Middlesex Street.
Yeah.
It's like a small farm right in the downtown area. We also have one out in Back Central, one over in the Lower Highlands. We've got one up in Centerville. But one over in Pawtuckaville, and we're actually talking to them about taking over 4 or 5 acres in Pawtuckaville that will actually run a farm. out
That's
there.
fantastic. I think it's working out great in Chelmsford. We have 2 of them now, one in kind of center-south Chelmsford, one in
Right.
North Chelmsford. But we have another topic, the minimum wage, that I'm hoping we could talk a little about. It's a current issue, I think, in Massachusetts and maybe throughout the country as well, given that the president, I think, recommended maybe going up from $7.25 to $9 an hour or something. But before we do that, I just want to quickly mention a couple of things that I found in researching the minimum wage, which is, well, in Massachusetts, it's currently $8 an hour, I believe is
Yep.
what I came up with.
It's $8.
The highest in New England, a minimum wage it seems it's $8.60 an hour in Vermont. So 60 cents more than Massachusetts at the moment. The highest in the country, the minimum wage, is $9.19 per hour in the state of Washington. But I just want to mention a couple of things about the minimum wage that before we discuss it. The real value of the minimum wage has dropped 25% since 1968 in inflation-adjusted dollars, okay? Dropped 25%. So you have a lot of people trying to, and we found out now, fast food workers, the average age, the median age is 28. A lot of single parents, a lot of people trying to make their way in life are working at these fast food places at minimum wage. It's really kind of sad. So with inflation adjusted, you're down 25% since 1968. That's pretty significant. Now, if the minimum wage, if it had grown at the same rate as productivity since 1979, the minimum wage would be $19.77 per hour in the country right now, rather than so productivity has been rising very significantly, but the minimum wage has not gone along with it, unfortunately. And finally, the CEO comparison, if Massachusetts minimum wage had grown the same rate as CEO compensation just since 1989, the minimum wage would be $18.42 an hour rather than $8 an hour. So it looks like a lot of people on the lower ends of the wage scale have really been left behind, not only in Massachusetts, but throughout the country. And I'm hoping that we could address this because I really feel for a lot of these people, especially those who are, raising a child. They're just trying to pay for their own way. If they're single people, 25, 28 years old, they're trying to get by, get their own apartment, trying to live on minimum wage, it's impossible. So I'm hoping we could also raise the minimum wage, but I'm also hoping that the companies themselves do what Costco is doing, for example. Costco pays their employees very well, gives them good benefits, still has a great product, great profits, and they keep their employees there. So you could treat your employees well on your own. You don't necessarily always have to have the government to force you to do these things. So I'm hoping we could help lower income people in some ways. So what do we think about that? Any thoughts on it?
Well, there's, currently right now there's been a lot of discussion both on the national and state level. In the Massachusetts legislature, we have I think there's like 3 or 4 bills in particular that deal with raising the minimum wage in tiers over like a 3-year period. I believe one goes as far as $12 in the 3rd year and then indexed to the rate of inflation. And then another, I think, goes to like $11.50 or $11. Tell me if I'm wrong, Tom. And those are, from everything I've read, I don't have the speaker's ear, but I am hearing that we will be having some sort of a discussion and debate moving forward. Another piece of it, I think, that would, a lot of, moderate to conservative individuals in the House and the Senate think about is UI reform too. That's unemployment insurance reform. Yeah. And so currently, we provide 30 weeks of benefits. We're the richest or the most generous in the nation, and the rest of the nation's 26 weeks. And I think Mass High Tech Council did a report that said that by changing duration of benefits and eligibility, you can actually pump something like $30 million in over the next 8 to 10 years into the economy and over billions into payroll. Yeah. That's something I think we should have a discussion with if we're going to talk about the minimum wage. Because the one thing about the minimum wage, and I agree with you in a lot of your points, however, we have to think about the small businesses. We have to think about how they're struggling and how they make ends meet as well, and giving flexibility to businesses. So that's something that needs to be on the table. It doesn't necessarily mean I disagree with it. I think it definitely needs to have a strong discussion. And there's 2 schools of thought. At the same time, it's you're giving people more money, and you're having them spend money and stimulate the economy as well. So there's 2 schools of thought on it.
That's true.
But I think they all need to be on the table, and we need to have that discussion.
Yes,
so.
Wonderful. Tom, your thoughts on that?
To mimic what Jim's saying, I think there's going to be a lot of discussion on it. Is it going to go from $8 to $15, which they were marching on the other day? I just don't see that happening. I don't see it going up to the $15. Will there be an increase? I believe there would be, but there's going to probably be some give and take with unemployment insurance, things like that. A lot of times you'll hear, is it a race to the bottom to move from our 30-week benefit down to 26-week? We're trying to move. We need to move up minimum wage, but at the same time, we also need to try to educate folks. Better education, better jobs. But a lot of these are in the service economy, the service economy that is going nowhere. I mean, we can't necessarily export these types of service jobs.
Yes.
So there's a lot of arguments, there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of arguments. Who are we putting out of business? Who would we hurt? I know a lot of the small businesses they don't pay minimum wage. So when I started to ask some of the folks that I talk to, it doesn't even affect them because
They pay above
they
minimum
just
wage.
don't pay that.
Right, they pay above minimum wage.
Above
yes,
minimum
but-
wage. So I think we really have to come down to, with minimum wage, are these the kids? I mean, traditionally, when you walk into a supermarket or a pizza place, or you're thinking that that's kids working, 3 to 6, 4 to 7, or whatever the case may be for
But it's
pocket
not-
change,
yeah.
and that's changing.
It's changing. I
That
just
has
went
been
to
changing.
a Taco Bell in Billerica last week, and I think the woman who waited on me definitely was closer to my age. you
But
know?
my point is, it used to be just for extra,
No, oh yeah, no, I know.
part-time or
Yeah.
minimum wage jobs were always considered
Yeah.
for kids in the summer, or kids during school hours, working moms, working dads, or someone picking up a second job.
Yes.
That has changed
Yes.
over
That's
the
the
last.
economy.
Unfortunately,
that
because
is
look
not
at the
right, and that's
unemployment rate; it's still high
7.2%.
That's
There
it.
are a lot of
And,
people.
and I'll tell you, and again, Tom knows this from the number of meetings we've been at. One of the big issues that we have, I know in the city of Lowell, and I would assume the same applies to Chelmsford and Westford and everywhere else, is there just aren't jobs for the kids. They would love to have jobs. I mean, I
Yes.
deal with the Urban Teen Equality Center down there, UTEC, and I meet with the young people down there, and they're not looking for just places to hang out at night, and sort of this image that we have of young people just looking for the frivolous things. These kids want jobs.
yes,
They
yeah.
want to go out. They want to find jobs. They want to be productive members of their community, and there aren't jobs because the economy is such that.
We don't
there's
have
nothing
them
out
at
there.
the
And then, but it does bring in the issue of if we have people that can't get jobs and they forced to work in these environments at $8 an hour, it becomes very, very difficult
Oh,
for them
very
to.
difficult.
Because the one statistic we don't talk about it is what Bernie's alluding to is the underemployed.
Yes.
Right.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, so we have 7.2% unemployed, and then you
On-
think about
on
the
the ropes, yeah.
underemployed, and they're taking these
Underemployed.
jobs
Oh,
like
yeah.
Tom and Bernie talked about, and these
Yeah.
are jobs that
Yeah.
part-time jobs for students, et
But
cetera.
but I still think at one point in time, this particular job that we're talking about, this minimum wage job, it was reserved. Reserved is a
yeah.
bad word,
Right.
No,
but it was
sure.
typically thought
Yeah,
to be,
yeah.
Right.
for
Right.
that high school kid, that college kid,
Right.
or
Yes.
hey, something, I need a second job, and that's been transforming, not just recently, over the last few years,
Yeah.
where is it a career now? Are people moving into these careers? But
Yeah.
then you see some of the larger box stores, and I'll throw a McDonald's or something into that,
Yeah.
where they say they actually try to move people up the ladder.
Sure.
I don't know whether they do or not.
I think diners are very concerned about this, and people that
Correct.
get wages
Smaller,
and tips
right.
and et cetera like
Yeah.
that.
Because they're also
And it's
talking
not-
about moving the waitresses up as well, the
Right.
bartenders and waitresses.
Yeah.
So
Well, they work very hard, these people in
They
these
do.
fast food places and other small businesses. And I just hate to see them slave away, kind of work so hard, sweat, and just can't get by with what they're making. And a lot of them, as you probably know, are getting food stamps now and some other forms of welfare to try to get by, especially if they have children. I'm sure that happens quite often. But therefore, what I would rather see, rather than state by state, the way we're doing it now, whereas say we go up to say $11 in Massachusetts. Say New Hampshire is still at $7.75. Well, of course, a lot of people are going to set up their businesses more in New Hampshire rather than Mass because they have the competitive edge over there in terms of labor. But if you do it federally, which is what I would prefer, then people can't jump state to state and have a big competitive advantage. For example, if the state mandated a $12 minimum wage, I would be more in favor of that than each state going their own way because people could cross borders now. The way you can now and go to New Hampshire with no
Yeah.
Sales tax.
but I don't think McDonald's is going to leave anyway.
Well, that's it. I don't think those
You don't
types of
think they're gonna-
businesses. But you're not going to have all those businesses moving up to. People aren't going to drive
Oh,
up,
I know what you mean.
I'm more
Get up.
concerned with the diners,
Right.
not being able to survive.
not being able to
Sure.
survive.
Yes,
Right.
yeah.
We have a lot of diners throughout
Rosie's,
Chelmsford,
Jesse's,
in Lowell,
Owl's, yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I'm sure in Westford and every. That's more of my concern. I mean, quite frankly, McDonald's, Burger King,
They'll survive.
they're going to be fine.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
The CEO of McDonald's made $13 million last year.
But they try to push off that these folks are owning franchise, and I get it. It's hard. It's working. I get it. But I'm more concerned about the guy that's actually behind the grill,
Right, exactly.
that's
That
working
owns
the
that, right.
grill, that owns the note, that's employing these 3 people. What's going to happen? What's going to
Oh,
happen
yes.
to him?
Yeah, no, I know.
But once again, some of the folks that I've spoke to, they don't even pay minimum wage. They don't pay it.
above it, you're
Yeah.
saying, yes.
Right.
So I mean, they probably would
Because
have.
some people try to pay under the table, as you know, and that's what I was clarifying, that you're not saying they're paying below.
Nope.
Because some people would do that, they'll exploit people so much, or immigrants or whatever, say undocumented.
Sure.
A lot of them would get paid below minimum wage, under the table, and you just, the employers would sometimes take advantage of them. Maybe this occurs more, when you have the farm workers and things like that out in the West and the Midwest.
I just don't know if
But-
the federal government will be able to do it. I don't
Well,
think
they can't seem to do
Well, they don't seem
much.
Yeah, they don't seem
So,
to be inclined. Right now, they're just talking about $9 anyway, going from 7 to 9.
And they can talk about $9, but that doesn't mean they're going to do
Doesn't mean
$9.
it's
So
right.
it's
Yeah,
different. They
yeah.
won't do it.
But
right.
it's pretty sad. Were you going to say something else, Bernie, about
No.
that? I'm sorry.
Well, no, I think everything we talk about just speaks to the whole issue that obviously people talk about of income inequality that's just in this sort of this divide that's happening.
Exactly. It's getting worse.
And it
though,
is
isn't
getting
it?
worse.
And we have to address that. We just can't let the
But-
low-income people,
Right.
go and just say, oh, go on your own, especially when you have huge unemployment. They can't find jobs. Young people can't find jobs. Older people can't find good career-type jobs.
Right.
Well, this is a perfect example, Tom, if I could throw this out, and I'll throw it out to my colleague as well. When people are watching this and listening, please call us and let us know. Because I'm trying to pull the information from people.
About-
and
let you know about what?
minimum wage.
Right.
How they feel about it, you
How
mean?
they feel
That can
about it.
be-
Because
okay, good.
most of the folks I'm talking to right now, it doesn't even affect them, doesn't affect their business, and they just kind of
I know,
do
but
this.
well, it doesn't affect me
Right,
either.
but I mean,
read about what's
I think it's so
going
important
on.
for us to hear.
Yeah.
From the small diners, from the small establishments.
Oh, yes,
if
I
they
agree.
are indeed paying minimum wage.
Yes, I agree.
But most of the folks I'm hearing from, they don't pay it, so it's kinda,
Yes.
they would probably say something if we went from 8 to 18.
Right, right.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
think they're paying that much over minimum
Oh,
wage,
yeah,
but they're
yes,
paying
yeah.
north. From what I've heard,
Well,
north of 9,
If you
10,
look at-
11.
But look at the example of Costco, though. There's a close to $20 average pay for their people there. But I go there, about once a month, and they keep their employees for a long time. Their employees are happier. They do a better job. They work hard. So you could pay your employees well, and a lot of times you'll end up with increased profits. Look at Costco.
Right, but one of the complicating factors here, and this is a huge macro issue, is that, and I think it's wonderful what Costco does, and I think I shop at Costco every now and then myself, but it's the Costco's that have put the small guys
Out of business,
out of
right.
business, and
begin
that's
with,
where all
right.
those small jobs were that were employing the young people and putting the demand in the marketplace to then drive up wages to get
yeah.
employees. There's a lot of
Oh, yeah,
moving
it's
parts
very
to this
tough.
whole
Certainly
thing.
is.
But part of that, it's not just Costco, it's high technology.
It's,
I mean, look at
it's,
the
it's
displacement
technology
of
in
technology.
general, right?
And look at how many secretaries we used to have before. When I first started with the federal government, you'd write something by hand and give it to a secretary,
Right.
and that secretary would type it up for you. Now everybody has their own.
If I had to do that, I would forget by the time I had to write it down. I'd just type it down immediately, send an email.
That's true.
But now, of course,
If I had to write it down
yeah,
and call
everybody's
Jim,
different.
I'd be like, no, I better call him right now.
So high tech.
Get it over with.
I love watching these shows where they make new cars on the Velocity Channel, new Porsches and all kinds of cars. You see the robots there just doing things that human
I know.
beings would do 50 years ago.
Well, just to leave, I know you're wrapping up, but just to leave with this, I was reading something the other day. They're talking about the perfect hamburger.
Yeah.
That what McDonald's and all these folks will be looking at, that they actually
Do by robots.
by
Right.
robot.
Would that be with a
Yeah.
pretzel bun?
Yeah, kind of like the
So
pretzel thing.
unless we address,
But it's just kind of interesting.
Have you
because-
tried that
yet?
No,
It's a-
I
we have
not.
to address these eventually. Employment's going to get very, very difficult,
Tight.
and even more so than it is now. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Jim Arciero,
Thank
for
you,
being
Tom.
a wonderful show.
Much
Thank
being
you
here.
very much. Thank you,
Tom,
Bernie Lynch.
thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Great, and got to get you guys up into the 30s pretty soon.
For
That
my
would be
20th, I want a
fantastic.
cake.
Yeah,
I want
right.
a cake for my
okay,
20th.
I
I just want a
promise.
10. By 25th, I got nothing.
Well, you got nothing.
I know, the
You gotta-
25th,
yeah,
I
but you
should've
got the
had a
silver
cake.
award.